Lyara moved carefully through the tall silver-blue grass, her long fingers brushing the leaves aside as she studied the tracks before her. The prints were fresh. Too fresh. They belonged to a Grathar, the largest predator on her world. Her people told stories about it, stories whispered in fear. Its claws could shred stone. Its roar was said to freeze blood. No one from her village would ever follow such tracks. No one except her. She was a biologist, a seeker of truths her people avoided. Curiosity often outweighed caution in her heart, though it never fully silenced the trembling in her chest. This time, though, something was different. The tracks didn't end where they should. Instead of continuing deeper into the forest, they stopped abruptly in a wide clearing. And in that clearing she saw him. The stranger sat calmly by a fire, his back straight, his hair tangled and dusty. His clothing was torn and patched with scraps of hide. The fire crackled brightly, and over it, skewered on sharpened sticks, sizzled the unmistakable shape of a Grathar. Its scaled hide, black and red like cooling lava, curled as the heat split it open. The smell of roasted flesh hung thick in the air. Lyara froze, her heart pounding so hard she feared he would hear it. This was impossible. The apex predator of her planet, feared even by the bravest hunters, was lying dead and roasting over a stranger's fire. And the stranger was eating it. He tore a piece of meat free with a crude knife, lifted it to his lips, and bit down without hesitation. His face was strange, the angles softer than her people's, but there was a rough beauty in his worn features. His eyes, though, were what held her, steady, deep, and utterly unafraid. He chewed thoughtfully, as though consuming the galaxy's deadliest beast was nothing more than dinner after a long day. Lyara felt her throat tighten. She should have run. She should have screamed. Instead, she found herself rooted to the spot, unable to look away. Who or what was this being? The fire popped loudly. The man glanced up suddenly, his gaze meeting hers through the tall grass. Lyara's breath caught. For a long, tense heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. His eyes, so strangely human, so alive, locked onto hers. He did not bare his teeth in a predator's snarl. He did not leap to attack. Instead, he tilted his head slightly as though surprised but not threatened. Slowly, with deliberate calm, he lifted another stick of roasting meat and held it out toward the shadows where she stood, an offering. Lyara's skin prickled with heat. Her people told her humans were myths, lost wanderers of the stars, violent and reckless. If this was one of them, then the stories had been both right and wrong. Yes, he was dangerous. Only something truly dangerous could kill a Grathar. But there was no cruelty in his gesture, no hunger for dominance. He was sharing his kill. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but her heart whispered otherwise. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting a weary kindness. Lyara realized with a chill that sank deep into her bones that this human was not merely surviving here. He was thriving in a place her people feared to tread. And he was doing it alone? For the first time in her life, Lyara felt the strange tug of two conflicting emotions, terror and fascination. She took one trembling step forward out of the grass, her eyes never leaving his. He did not move, only waited, the food still extended. The flames painted his rough features in gold and shadow. She whispered to herself, though the words were swallowed by the crackling fire. He killed it. He ate it. The impossible. And though she did not yet understand why, Lyara knew her life had just changed forever. Lyara did not sleep that night. Even after she retreated into the safety of the forest, her mind would not let go of the image. The human sitting calmly by his fire, the roasted Grathar stretched above the flames, and the quiet confidence in his eyes. Her people had always taught that survival depended on caution, on avoiding risks, on living in the shadows of predators. Yet this human, this impossibility, had looked at the monster they feared most and turned it into supper. Lyara wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders as the night air cooled. She perched on a high root and tried to steady her thoughts. Every instinct demanded that she leave, that she return to her people and forget she had ever seen him. But the memory of his outstretched hand haunted her. That simple act, offering food, had shaken her more than the sight of him killing the predator. Was it kindness, or was it some trick? Her heart argued against her mind, against reason. When dawn arrived, Lyara found her feet carrying her back toward the clearing. She moved quietly, each step deliberate, careful not to draw attention. Yet part of her wanted him to notice. The smoke from the human's fire rose in a thin spiral above the trees. She approached from the ridge, hiding behind brush, her large eyes peering down at the scene below. He was awake, crouched near the fire, sharpening the edge of his strange knife with a stone. His movements were slow, precise, filled with focus. The Graythar's bones lay piled neatly to one side, stripped of most flesh. Nothing was wasted. Lyara studied him closely. He was built differently than her people. Broader shoulders, shorter frame, heavier muscles. His skin was marked with scars, some fresh, some faded with time. He wore determination like armor, but there was something else beneath it. Something fragile, a shadow behind his eyes. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. This human was dangerous, yes, but also lonely. The fire popped again. The human raised his head. His eyes swept the trees, and for a terrifying second, Lyara thought he had spotted her. She held her breath, body tense, ready to flee, but his gaze softened as if he knew she was there and chose not to chase her away. Instead, he reached toward the fire and lifted a fresh piece of meat. He placed it carefully on a flat rock, then pushed the rock away from the flames, toward the edge of the clearing. The message was clear. He was leaving food for her. Lyara's pulse raced. Her mouth was dry. To accept meant trust, but to refuse meant wasting a gift. Among her people, refusing an offering was nearly an insult. Slowly trembling, she stepped from the trees. The human remained seated, though his eyes followed her every move. The firelight caught the gold flecks in his gaze. Lyara moved like prey approaching a predator's den. She stopped just short of the rock, her hands shaking. The meat smelled rich, smoky, strangely inviting. She reached for it, but hesitated. Her eyes lifted to meet his. He nodded once, small, encouraging. Her throat tightened. She picked up the meat, brought it to her lips, and bit down. The taste shocked her. It was unlike any food she had known. Strong, wild, yet sustaining. Heat filled her chest. She swallowed, then realized the human was smiling. Not mockery, not triumph, just relief. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Lyara stepped back quickly, frightened by the rush of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude, curiosity, and a strange pull toward the man she had feared only yesterday. Without a word, she vanished into the forest, clutching the meat in her hands. Behind her, the human did not chase. He simply returned to his fire, his eyes thoughtful, his smile faint but real. That night, as Lyara lay awake once more, she realized with quiet dread that she wanted to see him again, and the most dangerous thing of all, she wanted to know him. The days passed slowly, each one a tug of war inside Lyara's heart. She told herself to stay away, to keep her distance, to forget the human in the forest, but her feet betrayed her. Again and again she found herself drifting back to the clearing. At first she only watched from the trees. She studied his habits, the way he built his fire, the way he cleaned his tools with care. He wasted nothing. Even the predator's bones were sharpened into points or carved into handles. He worked with quiet patience, as if every action was deliberate, as if survival itself was an art. Eventually, her curiosity grew heavier than her fear. One morning, she stepped from the trees before he could place food on the stone. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground. The human looked up in surprise. Then slowly, he stood and gave her a nod of greeting. "Hello," he said, his voice low, rough like stones grinding together. Lyara startled. She knew some words from the trade records of her people. Old fragments of human speech carried down through myths. She understood him barely. "Hello," she repeated awkwardly, her tongue struggling around the sound. His smile was small, but it warmed the clearing. "Good," he said, pointing to her chest. "You." Then he tapped his own. "Me, Elias. Elias," she echoed, stumbling over the name. He chuckled softly, and the sound startled her again. Not harsh, not mocking, but light. Human laughter, something she had never heard before. He gestured at her expectantly. "Lyara," she whispered. "Lyara," Elias said carefully, and hearing her name in his voice made something flutter inside her chest. From that moment, their fragile bond began to take shape. The next days were filled with gestures, broken words, and hesitant attempts to share meaning. Elias showed her his fire, letting her feel its warmth, teaching her how he sparked it with stone and metal. Lyara's people avoided fire, fearing its wild nature, but in Elias's hands it became a friend. She brought him fruits and herbs from the forest, demonstrating which were safe, which could heal wounds, which could poison. He listened intently, repeating her words in his rough accent. His focus was sharp, his respect genuine. One evening, Elias demonstrated how he set traps for smaller beasts. He crouched beside her, hands moving with careful precision as he twisted vines into a snare. Lyara leaned closer, watching the strength in his fingers, the quiet control. When the trap snapped shut, she flinched. Elias glanced up, smiling. Safe, he assured her, holding her gaze. Something stirred inside her then. Admiration, yes, but also something softer, more dangerous. The bond deepened further when Elias one night handed her a sharpened bone spear. He pressed it into her hands gently. For you, he said. Lyara shook her head at once. Her people avoided weapons. To carry one was to invite violence. But Elias placed his hand lightly over hers, guiding her grip. His touch was warm, steady. Safe, he repeated, voice gentle. His eyes searched hers as if asking for trust. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, and held the spear. Her arms trembled, not from the weight but from the strange flood of emotions his closeness awakened. Around the fire, they began to share fragments of their pasts. Elias pointed to the stars, naming constellations in his tongue, speaking of ships and battles and a home that no longer waited for him. His words were halting, but Lyara could feel the ache behind them. She, in turn, told him of her people, how they lived in constant caution, how she had always felt apart, her curiosity unwelcome among those who clung to fear. Elias listened, truly listened, his expression soft and understanding. It was then Lyara noticed the change inside herself. Her fear of him had not vanished, but it had transformed. What had begun as terror now burned as fascination. She admired his strength, but more than that, she admired the sadness he carried with dignity. She saw the cracks in him, and through those cracks she saw something deeply human, something her people had never shown her. That night, when she left the clearing, Lyara paused at the edge of the trees. She looked back once more at Elias, sitting quietly by his fire, the flames casting shadows across his scarred face. For the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. She did not only want to study him, she wanted to understand him. And worse, her heart whispered she wanted to be near him. The forest was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Lyara sat near the fire while Elias prepared another meal, showing her how he carved strips of meat thin so they would cook faster. His patience amazed her. Every motion was steady, precise. She found herself watching his hands more than the fire. But then the silence pressed in. No insect buzzed, no bird called. The stillness felt heavy, unnatural. Lyara's skin prickled. She glanced into the shadows, her instincts screaming. Elias noticed her sudden tension. His head tilted, listening. In that moment, his entire body changed. Calm melted into alertness. He reached for his spear, muscles coiling like a predator ready to strike. The sound came then, a low growl, deep and rumbling, vibrating through the trees. Lyara's heart leapt into her throat. Her breath caught. She knew that sound too well. A Grather pack. Her body froze. Memories surged. Stories of shredded hunters, of villages forced to abandon their homes when a pack settled nearby. Her people always fled. No one fought a Grather pack. Not even the bravest. But Elias did not run. Stay, he whispered, voice low and firm, though she barely understood the word. He stepped forward, spear in hand, scanning the tree line with eyes sharp as steel. The first beast emerged from the shadows. Massive, all sinew and scale, its molten red eyes fixed on the fire. Saliva dripped from its jaws, sizzling when it struck the ground. Behind it, two more shapes slinked, circling. Lyara's legs trembled. She wanted to flee, to vanish into the forest. But her body refused to move. Fear rooted her in place. Then Elias shouted, a sharp, defiant sound that rang through the clearing. The predators hesitated, taken aback by the human's boldness. He hurled his spear with deadly precision. It struck the lead Grather in the eye, driving deep. The beast shrieked and collapsed, thrashing violently. The others roared, charging forward. Lyara gasped, certain Elias would die. But he moved with frightening grace, grabbing a burning branch from the fire and swinging it wide. The flames hissed, casting wild light. The predators snarled, recoiling from the sudden blaze. Elias pressed the attack, jabbing the branch forward, forcing the beasts back step by step. His movements were not reckless but controlled, deliberate, each strike pushing them farther from the camp. Lyara's fear shifted into awe. He wasn't only strong, he was clever. He didn't fight like prey. He fought like something higher, something untouchable. At last, the beasts retreated into the shadows, their growls fading. The injured one twitched once more, then lay still. The clearing smelled of ash and blood. Elias dropped the branch, chest rising and falling with deep breaths. Sweat gleamed on his brow. Slowly, he turned back to Lyara. She was still frozen where she sat, trembling, her eyes wide. He walked toward her, crouched low, and touched her arm gently. "Safe," he said softly. Her breath broke. Safe? How could he say that word so easily after facing what no one dared face? Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. She had not cried since childhood, but now they spilled freely, streaking her cheeks. Elias's hand lingered lightly on her arm, his expression softening when he saw her tears. In that fragile moment, Lyara felt something she had never known before. Not just safety, but trust. Real, unshakable trust. She realized then that Elias was not simply surviving in this world. He was protecting her. Her fear of him melted, replaced by something deeper and far more dangerous. As the fire crackled again, Lyara whispered to herself in her own tongue, a truth that made her heart tremble. "He is not a predator. He is my shield." The forest had gone quiet again, but this time it was not the silence of danger. The predators had retreated, leaving only the firelight and the sound of Elias's steady breathing. Lyara sat close to the flames, still trembling, though her tears had dried. Elias had saved her, no more than that. He had faced death without hesitation, and stood between her and the nightmare her people had always fled. The thought twisted her heart in ways she could not name. Elias crouched nearby, wiping blood from his blade with a strip of hide. His movements were calm, efficient, yet his shoulders sagged as if under an invisible weight. Lyara studied him in the glow of the fire. The scars across his arms, the lines etched into his face, the shadows in his eyes. These spoke of battles long before this night. She wanted to ask him about those scars. She wanted to understand the man behind the strength, but words were clumsy things between them. Still, she tried. She touched her chest and asked softly, "Lyara." Then she pointed to him. He paused, then gave a tired smile. "Elias." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Elias." The name felt heavy with meaning. She pressed on, tilting her head, gesturing with her hands, mimicking fighting, then pointing at his scars. Her eyes asked the question her tongue could not form. Elias's gaze darkened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he leaned back, staring into the flames. "War," he said finally, his voice low. His hand traced across his chest, tapping the old scars. "War." Lyara's throat tightened. She knew that word. Even her people, cautious as they were, had heard it whispered across the stars. War was destruction, fire, loss. Elias's eyes softened as he looked at her. He tapped his chest again, then shook his head slowly. "No more." His voice cracked slightly on the words. Lyara felt her heart ache. Beneath his strength was pain, a grief he carried alone. She leaned closer, her eyes shimmering with unspoken questions. He noticed. For a moment he hesitated. Then he picked up a small stick and began drawing in the dirt. Shapes formed, figures crude but clear enough. A man, a woman, a child. Then a fire, a falling star, broken lines. His hand stilled. He brushed the drawings away with a rough motion, jaw tight. Lyara's chest burned with sympathy. She understood he had lost everything. Family, home, the life he once knew. Her hand moved without thought. She reached across the space and touched his arm lightly. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, his muscles tense. Elias froze, startled. Then slowly he let out a long breath. They sat like that for a while, the fire crackling between them, words unnecessary. Lyara felt something shift within her. Her people had always taught that survival was everything. Yet sitting beside Elias, she realized survival alone was not enough. What good was living without connection? Without being seen? For the first time she felt seen. Truly seen. Elias glanced at her, his eyes softening, his expression almost gentle. "Lyara," he said quietly, her name sounding fragile in his rough voice. Her heart fluttered. She answered with his name just as softly, "Elias." The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm, like a blanket. That night, when Lyara finally left for her camp in the trees, she carried not only safety in her heart, but something deeper. She feared it, yet longed for it. Elias was more than a human survivor. He was a man scarred by loss, carrying both strength and sorrow. And in that mix, Lyara saw something she had never dared dream of before. She saw hope. Lyara had known it was only a matter of time before her people discovered Elias. Secrets could not be kept forever. Not in a community where every absence was noticed, every whisper chased down. It happened at dawn. She returned to the village after another night by the fire, still carrying the warmth of Elias's presence in her chest. But the moment she stepped into the settlement, she felt the change. Eyes turned toward her, sharp and suspicious. Voices hushed. Elders stood waiting. "Lyara," one of them said, his voice stern but shaking with unease. "You have been leaving the boundaries often." "Where do you go?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to lie, but her people's gaze pinned her in place. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, another villager stepped forward. "We have seen him," the woman said coldly. "The outsider. The predator in human skin." A ripple of fear ran through the gathered crowd. Murmurs rose. Words like danger, death, and curse hissed through the air. Lyara's heart pounded. She shook her head quickly. "No, he is not." But the elder raised a hand to silence her. "We know what he is, a human. The old records speak of them, reckless, violent. They devour worlds as easily as beasts devour prey. And now one has found us." Lyara's breath caught. The words cut deeply, but not because she believed them, because she knew her people did. "You do not understand," she said desperately, her voice trembling. "He saved me. He fights only to protect. Enough!" the elder thundered. His eyes narrowed with fear disguised as anger. "This Elias is a threat to our way of life. If he stays, the predators will be drawn to him, and death will follow. He must leave, or we will drive him out." The decision fell like a stone in Lyara's chest. That evening she returned to Elias. He was waiting by the fire as if he already knew. His eyes studied her carefully, reading her sorrow without words. "They found out," she whispered, her voice breaking. Elias's jaw tightened. He stirred the fire with a stick, sparks rising into the night. Then he nodded once, slow and heavy. "I go." The simplicity of it shattered her. "No," she burst out, stepping forward. "You cannot." He lifted a hand gently, silencing her. His expression was calm, but his eyes glistened in the firelight. "Lyara, safe, you." Her chest ached. He was choosing to leave not because he wanted to, but because he would not risk bringing danger to her. She shook her head fiercely, tears welling. "You are not danger. You are—" Her words faltered, her language too clumsy to carry what she felt. She pressed a trembling hand against her chest. "You are life." Elias's breath caught. For a long moment he simply stared at her, as though weighing the truth in her eyes. Then his shoulders sagged. He reached forward, brushing a strand of her hair gently behind her ear. "Lyara," he whispered, her name carrying a weight that made her knees weak. She leaned into his touch, her heart breaking and blooming all at once. But the choice loomed. If she stayed with her people, she would live in safety and shadows as she always had. If she followed Elias, she would leave everything she had ever known, but she would live fully with him. That night, as Elias packed his meager belongings, Lyara sat by the fire, silent tears tracing her cheeks. She knew what her people wanted, but for the first time in her life, she questioned whether their way was truly survival, or merely fear. And in the quiet between them, her heart whispered the truth she dared not speak aloud. She could not let him go. The next morning broke gray and cold. Mist curled between the trees, dampening the world in silence. Elias was ready to leave. His few belongings, a knife, a bundle of dried meat, a cloak of stitched hides, were packed into a rough satchel. He moved with calm efficiency, but Lyara saw the heaviness in his every step. He was already half a shadow, preparing to vanish from her life. Lyara stood near the fire, her hands clenched, her heart a storm. Words battled on her tongue, but none seemed strong enough. She wanted to beg him to stay. She wanted to run with him. But fear held her back, fear of betraying her people, fear of what it meant to give her heart to someone so different, so human. Elias turned, meeting her gaze. "Lyara," he said softly. He touched his chest, then gestured outward toward the endless forest. "I go, you. Safe." Safe! The word cut her deeper than any blade. Safe meant without him. Safe meant alone. Her throat burned. She forced out words in halting syllables. "Not safe. Without you." For the first time, Elias faltered. His hand mid-motion dropped slowly to his side. His eyes searched hers, wide and uncertain, as if he hadn't expected to hear such defiance. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. Before either of them could speak, the sound of voices drifted through the mist, distant but growing nearer. Lyara's blood ran cold. Her people. They were coming to drive him out, or worse, Elias stiffened, his jaw hardening. He reached for his spear, ready to face them, but Lyara's hand shot out, clutching his wrist. "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not fight, come." Her eyes pleaded with him. "Trust me." For a moment, Elias hesitated. Then he nodded once sharply and let her lead. They moved quickly through the forest, weaving between roots and low branches. Lyara's heart hammered in her chest, fear clawing at her throat. Behind them, her people's voices grew louder, echoing with anger and fear. At last, they broke into a small glade where the mist thinned. Elias stopped, pulling her gently behind a tree. They waited, breathless, as the voices passed close, then drifted farther away. Only when the silence returned did Elias look at her again. His hand still held her wrist, his grip firm but careful, as though she might vanish if he let go. "Lyara," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. She stared at him, chest heaving. She realized then that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She had betrayed her people's fear. She had chosen him. The weight of it should have crushed her, but instead she felt lighter, alive. "I cannot go back," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Not die without you." Elias's eyes softened. Pain flickered across his face, mingled with something deeper, rawer. Slowly, he lifted his free hand, brushing it against her cheek. His touch was gentle, trembling slightly, as if he too feared what it meant. "Lyara," he said again, but this time her name carried a tenderness that melted her heart. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel what she had buried beneath fear and duty. The pull toward him, the bond that had grown like fire in the dark. Her voice shook, but the words spilled out. I choose you." The world seemed to still. Mist hung around them, the forest silent. Elias's breath caught, his thumb brushing against her skin as though to memorize the moment. His eyes glistened, unguarded, the soldier's mask slipping to reveal the wounded man beneath. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Elias exhaled a long, trembling breath and pulled her against him, his arms wrapped around her, strong yet fragile, as though he was afraid she might shatter. Lyara clung to him, tears spilling silently. Not tears of fear this time, but of release, of finally stepping into the life she had always been denied. The voices of her people still haunted the distance, searching, but for the first time in her life, Lyara did not care. She had made her choice. Not safety, not fear, not survival in shadows. She chose Elias. And in his arms, with the fire of his heartbeat thundering against hers, Lyara realized something profound. She was no longer afraid of predators, or of death, or even of exile. The only thing she feared now was losing him. The forest was never still for long. Lyara and Elias moved through the mist, her hand clutching his as if it anchored her to this new path. Behind them, her people's search calls had faded, but danger never rested in these lands. Predators lurked always, silent and watchful. As if summoned by her thoughts, the silence broke. A low rumble trembled through the earth beneath their feet. Branches shuddered. From the shadows, a massive form stepped forward, larger than any Grethar Lyara had ever seen. Its scales shimmered with oily black sheen, its eyes burning like twin embers. This was no ordinary predator. This was an elder beast, a hunter of hunters. Lyara's blood ran cold. Her people told stories of such creatures, legends meant to frighten children. And yet here it stood, flesh and rage made real. Elias pushed her gently behind him. His spear was already in hand, his stance steady. He did not hesitate, but Lyara saw the tension in his shoulders, the knowledge that this fight was unlike the others. The beast roared, the sound rattling her bones. Then it lunged. Elias met it head-on, sidestepping with sharp precision, driving his spear into its flank. The weapon struck deep, but the creature barely faltered. Its claws swept out, tearing the ground where Elias had stood a moment before. Lyara's heart thundered. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide as her people always had. But her feet stayed rooted. She could not leave him. Not now, not ever. The battle raged. Elias fought with fire in his eyes, using every ounce of skill and strength, but the beast was relentless. Each strike he landed seemed only to enrage it further. Then in one terrible moment, the Greyther's tail lashed out. Elias was flung to the ground, his spear clattering out of reach. He groaned, forcing himself up, but the beast was already turning, jaws wide, ready to strike. Lyara's vision blurred with panic. She could not watch him die. Her eyes fell on the fallen spear. Without thinking, she dashed forward, seizing it in trembling hands. The weight nearly dragged her down, but she gripped tighter. Elias's lessons echoing in her mind. Safe, he had said once, guiding her fingers. Not safe now, but strong. The beast lunged toward Elias. With a cry torn from the depths of her soul, Lyara drove the spear forward, plunging it into the creature's exposed throat. The impact rattled her arms. The beast shrieked, thrashing violently. Elias scrambled to his feet, grabbing her hand, pulling her clear as the monster collapsed, shuddered, and finally lay still. Silence fell again. Lyara stood gasping, her hands trembling around the blood-slicked spear. Elias turned to her, eyes wide with shock. Not at the kill, but at her. You, he breathed, voice raw. He touched her cheek with shaking fingers, pride and relief warring in his gaze. Strong. Lyara's chest tightened, tears spilling freely. Not alone, she whispered. With you. Elias's expression softened, breaking open into something vulnerable, something she had never seen before. Slowly, he pulled her into his arms. This time she did not hesitate. She pressed against him, hearing his heartbeat pounding as wildly as hers. For the first time in her life, Lyara felt truly alive. Not because she had survived, but because she had chosen to live. The dawn came quietly, painting the mist with streaks of gold. They stood side by side, staring out over the endless forest. Behind them lay fear, exile, and the world she had once known. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a life without guarantees. But Lyara no longer feared the unknown. With Elias at her side, even the impossible seemed possible. She turned to him, her voice steady, her heart unshaken. Together, she said simply. Elias's smile was faint but real, warming her more than the sun itself. Together, he echoed. And in that new light, Lyara understood. The human had not only slain the galaxy's predators, he had devoured the fear inside her and awakened something greater. Love,